Hi, I'm Kristen. This is Crafting with Kristen. Today we're going to be making a cool project. We're going to be turning an ordinary band t-shirt into a halter-top. I'm going to give options to either make the ends ragged and tattered like this, also where you can make it straight across or make it short and make it into a crop top. The cool thing about this project is you're only going to need a band t-shirt and elastic, and optional but very recommended, my personal favorite touch, some metal rivets. Let's go ahead and get our sewing supplies together and let's make some cool clothes together. We're gonna get our supplies together. You're gonna need craft paper, some ordinary scissors. You're gonna need fabric scissors. You'll need a tank top. You'll need some elastic. Your band t-shirt that you're going to be using. Optional, you can use some scrap fabric for the back of it. You'll need some sewing pins, some metal rivets. A ruler is helpful. I also got these really cool tools on Amazon. You can also get them on other sites, but they're called pattern drafting tools. They're great for drawing curves. You'll also need a Sharpie or a pencil, and preferably some tailor's chalk or a watercolor pencil. You're going to lay your tank top out flat. This is what you're going to use for a guideline to see how big you're going to need your shirt. You want something that's about equal stretchiness to the shirt that you're using. Now I'm going to use these pattern drafting tools to get a nice, smooth, curved line. I've marked with dots where the width of everything is for the sides, and I'm just using that to trace over it. I'm also drawing a second set of lines for the seam allowance. It doesn't need to be that big, probably about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. And now I'm marking where I want the bottom seam to be. You can also change this if you're going to be doing a crop top. Now I'm marking where the top of the shirt was, and I'm using my pattern drafting tools to draw a curved line of where the halter top is going to be. I used the collar to mark where the center area was going to be. Now I'm taking another pattern drafting tool and I'm going to use this to make the collar seam. You can also use the collar of the shirt and not cut off and make a seam on it. Saves you a little bit of time. Now I'm adding a seam allowance on those sides. And now I'm going to take my craft scissors, not my fabric scissors, and I'm going to cut out my pattern. I usually use the rolled up craft paper, and then I'll just roll it backwards to kind of get it to flatten out. Now I'm going to smooth out the shirt that I'm going to use. I'm using a baby doll t-shirt, so I actually really don't need to do that much cutting on this one, but if you're using a big oversized band t-shirt, you'll have to do a lot more cutting. Unfortunately, these ones are more annoying to smooth out, so I got a little struggle going on here. It's important to lay it out flat so that your design is centered and so that you make sure that your cuts are all even. Now I'm laying my pattern on top. I'm going to go ahead and use something to weigh it down, and I'm tracing along with the watercolor pencil to mark where I want to cut everything. You can also use sewing pins to mark it if you don't have tailor's chalk or watercolor pencil handy. I decided I wanted it to come up at a little bit smaller of an angle to be more shoulder bearing. So I just marked it with the watercolor pencil. Now I'm using my fabric scissors to cut where I marked. Now I'm flipping the shirt over and I'm just going to do a straight line for the back of it. It's easier to lay flat when you kind of cut open the sleeves like I'm doing here, or just cut them off. It'll make your shirt lay a lot more flat and it's easier to work with. So now what I'm doing is laying it face up, and I'm just going to fold over the top half of it, smooth everything out nice and flat, and I'm going to use this ruler to draw a line. You want to make sure that you have a little seam allowance to fold over so everything lines up. If you forget to do that though, you can always add a little elastic lace on the back, or you can add some elastic. There's always ways to improvise if you cut too much. You just gotta think creatively. Now I'm folding over that seam twice in my direction. This avoids having to do a zigzag stitch to secure the fabric. So it's kind of my preferred way to finish the edges for tank tops. Snipping off a little bit of the excess fabric there. And now I'm repeating the same on the other side, folding it over once and a second time, and then pinning in place. Perfect. You can use a ruler to double check that everything is pinned evenly and in place. Now I'm going to pin over that back seam. I had a little bit too much seam allowance, so I'm just trimming off some of this excess. It's usually better to leave too much fabric than not enough. You can also use this little extra piece if you do not have elastic as the tie for the top of your halter top. So if you're low on supplies, there's still a way to DIY it on a budget. So just like I did with the other seams, I'm rolling it over twice and then pinning in place, trying to keep a straight line the whole way through. Afterwards, you can always use a ruler to double check your work. Everything looks even, we're ready to go. Now that I got my sewing machine set up, I'm going to use a reinforced straight stitch, and I want to make sure that I'm using the proper needle for this. Since it's just t-shirt fabric, I'm using a jersey needle. One tip that I learned many years down the line as a seamstress that I wish somebody told me earlier was it's important to always change your sewing needles frequently, even if they don't break. Your sewing machine will need a lot less maintenance and repair if you're not putting extra strain on it using a dull needle. It also will avoid things like skip stitches or things getting jammed up in your machine. Now that I've sewn down those two front seams and the back seam, it's time to add the elastic. I'm going to sew it on either side of the collar, and I'm just checking the length. First, I'm going to finish the edges because most elastic tends to fray in the wash, so I'm just doing a zigzag stitch along the edge. Now I'm going to sew one piece on either side of the collar. Just like that. I'm changing my thread color strictly for aesthetic purposes. Like I said before, you can use a little scrap of t-shirt fabric as a little string if you do not have elastic. Using a reinforced straight stitch to attach these. If you're using an oversized band t-shirt, you are going to need to sew the two side seams up. So you'll basically lay your shirt inside out and just pin it that way and do a straight stitch along either side. Pretty simple, and I go over it in a lot of my other videos. And that's how it looks. You could call this a finished project, or we can add a little bit more flair to it. When adding rivets, it's important to always measure the space in between. It'll give you a much more polished look. So I'm marking everything with this little watercolor pencil, and I'm measuring using my measuring tape. Now that I got everything marked up, I'm taking the sewing awl, which is a little pointy tool. It's very sharp, so make sure not to go through your fingers. And then you want to make sure to just get a little hole in it. If it's too big, you're going to wind up having your rivets go through the hole of the fabric and come out of your shirt. You can always make the hole a little bit bigger. Now you're going to put the nipple-shaped piece that is called the post of the rivet through the bottom with the nipple side facing up. And then you're going to snap the cap of it on top. You'll feel it snap into place, but that does not mean it's secure. You're still going to have to set it with a mallet and with the setting tools. Now that I've snapped them all into place, it's time to set them. So I'm gonna take this little anvil and I'm gonna put it with the flat side facing up, and I'm gonna take my setting tool that's the right size for these particular rivets. I'm gonna place it over the top of them, and then I'm gonna strike it with the mallet. And just repeat until you've set them all. There we have it. Nice, super simple, easy project. Now, if you don't want it straight across the bottom, you can cut it shorter for a crop top and then just do a straight stitch along the bottom to hem it. Or you can do what I'm doing, which is we're going to give it a nice tattered bottom. So I'm basically cutting little triangles in the bottom, and they're kind of getting shorter and shorter as they go up the side seams, kind of creating a V shape. I like this because it's a really flattering shape. It really shows off your curves. One thing that helps give it a real authentic tattered look is not making all the pieces exactly the same size, or sometimes putting a little extra snip or tear into each piece. I'm going to repeat the same process with the back, just cutting little triangles and then giving them a little extra distressing as I see fit. I've also done tops like this where I've given them a fringe bottom, which is really fun. I might have to do that for another video. There you have it. There's our finished product. I hope that your project turned out as cool as mine did, and I hope you had lots of fun making it. If you really love how your project turned out, make sure to tag me in social media, and then leave a comment below for what kind of projects you want to see in the future, and please like, comment, and subscribe.